What happens when people leave fame and fortune behind to pursue God in the priesthood or the religious life? Today, we'll cover 7 stories of actors, athletes, and models who left behind everything that they could have been in the world and bet it all on a life with Christ. Hey guys, I'm Father David Michael Moses. I'm a Catholic priest. If you enjoy these types of videos, please make sure you subscribe so you don't miss out on future content. I think sometimes people outside the church have this erroneous view that you only become a priest or a sister or a nun if you didn't have a lot of other options. And this is kind of hilarious to me because when you look at the lives of the saints, or even just talking to guys I was in seminary with, it was so clear that these people had tons of other options. The saints were people of great intelligence. They were people who had a lot of influence, who were likable, fun to be around. And they chose, instead of using those gifts for themselves and their own worldly gain, they chose to use them to help build the kingdom. And like I said, that was my experience with guys in seminary. They could have done almost anything else in the world and been successful. And instead they chose to become priests, which is a really beautiful witness for all of us. So first up, we have Plagal Overos. I have no idea if I'm saying that name right, but she was a model. She used to have a very successful modeling career until she went to visit Our Lady of Fatima, the shrine there. And during that visit, she had this persistent vision of herself as a nun. And she said when that first vision came into her mind, it was just absurd to her. She was like, this makes no sense. This is crazy. But it stuck with her. It kept coming. And so she eventually had to take it seriously and enter a religious life. She became a nun and began to live a life of prayer, focused totally on God. Pretty awesome. There's something powerful about a woman who is beautiful choosing a life of celibacy. Reminds me of a story of Bishop Fulton Sheen, that he was on a flight, apparently, and there was a stewardess on the flight, a flight attendant, and he told her, he said, hey, if you ever, she was apparently very, very beautiful, and he said, if you ever want to use your beauty for God, let me know. Pretty direct thing to say. Well, apparently in the moment she didn't say much, but that stuck with her. If you want to use your beauty for God, let me know. And so that thought, she just couldn't get away from it. And finally she went to his office. She somehow found Bishop Sheen, went to his office, and she said, okay, I'm in. I want to use my beauty for God. And he said, okay. He said, I can set you up with a leper colony. So leprosy, like we see in the Bible, these people who have their bodies basically falling apart, totally disfigured. They eventually die from it. Although it's much rarer now, there are certain places of certain leper colonies where people are sent. Really, really sad. But he told her you should go there. And these people who have lives that are filled with so much disfigurement, they can die looking at your beautiful face. Wild. Being a sister is at its heart being a bride of Christ. So it makes sense that Jesus would choose a beautiful bride. Once she entered the convent, this former model, she said, the Lord is never wrong. The Lord is never wrong. So she was very, very confident in her discernment. Next up, we have Dolores Hart. She was a Hollywood actress. You might have heard of her. She was famous because she starred in a movie with Elvis Presley. She was the love interest in that movie with him. So she was in tons of popular movies, super, super popular actress. But at the height of her fame, at just the age of 24, she went to visit this abbey. And she just fell in love with the life of the sisters there. Felt super, super called to enter with them. One note, apparently her fiance, she was engaged at the time, was pretty resistant to this. I wonder why. But apparently he too came around and she entered the convent. And while she started just kind of on bottom of the so-called totem pole, she actually ended up becoming the prioress there. So she became the leader of that community. God using her gifts for something a lot bigger than her acting career would have been. There was a documentary that came out in 2011 about her life, and the title was God is Bigger Than Elvis, which I like, makes sense. We then have Crockett, who actually has a cause up for canonization right now. Really, really a powerful, charismatic figure, worth looking up. There's an amazing documentary about her life on YouTube called All or Nothing. So she grew up wanting to be a famous actress. She had some pretty wild teenage years. If I remember correctly, was kind of into partying, that kind of stuff. She had tons of opportunities. She was on local television stations where she was from. And she actually got an invitation from Nickelodeon to participate, but she ended up declining that. It wasn't until she went on a retreat in Spain during Holy Week that she had a real transformation. Again, if I remember correctly, she thought the trip She didn't know it was like a pilgrimage. She thought it was like a party trip. And so she kind of went with her friends, thought they would just kind of have fun, hanging out, partying. And instead it turned into this whole spiritual experience where she really encountered God as she kissed the cross on Good Friday. And her life was totally changed. So when she was 18, she ended up going into the convent. And she has a great line. She said that at first in her discernment, she grew up wanting to be a famous actress. And then she felt called to become a nun. And so she said, okay, I guess I just have to be a famous nun. She kind of had to like combine the two ambitions together. And what's kind of ironic, or you could say providential, is that she ended up becoming a very famous nun. When she was serving in Ecuador, when she was 33, she was helping with the school children there and such. And there was a horrible earthquake that came through there that actually killed her. And so even though she died young, the cause for her canonization is now opened. She's servant of God, I believe is what it is. So we will see if she ends up becoming a saint, how the church wants to use the witness of her life. Regardless, I would definitely recommend checking out the documentary on YouTube about her life. It's free and very, very well done. We also have Father Chase Hilenbrink. You might actually recognize that name. He played professional soccer in Chile and then in New England for several years. But at the age of 26, what usually would be the prime of an athletic career, he left it all, felt called to the seminary, and then ended up becoming a priest. He actually is a priest here in the United States. You might have run into him at some different Catholic events. He spoke at Seek, the Focus Conference this last year. I believe he's a vocations director now, which is awesome. I can only imagine being a young guy, kind of looking at your different options and hearing his testimony of how he left this lucrative and successful soccer career to instead pursue something higher in the priesthood. So he's someone you can actually look up and is doing some really fantastic work in the church. I thought it was also worth including a saint in this list who lived not too long ago, Saint Katherine Drexel. She grew up in a very wealthy family. They actually, in modern dollars, they gave away $1 million every year to the poor, just to charity. They actually would even hire private investigators to go and investigate which family needed the money the most. That's how much money they had to give away. As an adult, she received a $7 million inheritance, but that was just the cash value at the time. If you convert that with inflation to present day, it's actually $200 million. That's how much money she got. But instead of living what could have been a very lavish, luxurious lifestyle, she ended up using that money to assist Native American and African American populations in the country. Super, super generous, real life of service. And she actually went through a lot of opposition. So at one point, the Ku Klux Klan was very annoyed by what she was doing. And they received a note at the convent that basically said, stop doing what you're doing, or we will tar and feather you. It must have been terrifying for the sisters. But that week, a tornado comes through the area and destroys all of the Ku Klux Klan buildings. So there ends up being no retaliation at all. Hard to know for sure, but sort of seems like an act of God. In her 35 years of ministry, she founded almost 150 missions and over 60 schools for those in need, and of course, founded Xavier University in Louisiana. So could have lived a life of wealth and instead chose to live a life of service. An incredible witness, St. Katherine Drexel. Real quick, I want to let you guys know about our Concerts for Life. Each summer, I get together with an all-priest band. I write all the music, and we do a series of shows to support women in crisis pregnancies. It's a packed show, start to finish. It is a blast. I really think you'll enjoy it. You can check the link below for tickets, and hopefully we'll see you this summer. We then have a politician. Sean Patrick Paul O'Sullivan was a Canadian politician who actually left politics to become a Catholic priest. So when he was just 20 years old, he became the youngest member elected to the House of Commons in Canada at that time. And it was actually his private bill, one that he worked on in 1975, that gained recognition for the beaver as Canada's official animal symbol. So he was super involved in that. In 1977, he announced that he was leaving politics to become a Roman Catholic priest and eventually became the director of vocations for the Archdiocese of Toronto. Sadly, he ended up getting cancer several different times and actually passed away at just the age of 37. But a beautiful life of service to the church, even though he could have had a lot more gained in the world. Lastly, here's a story that came out a couple years ago. This guy isn't quite a priest yet, but it's kind of interesting. His name was Eduardo Santini, and apparently he won some kind of competition that named him the most handsome man in all of Italy when he was in his late teens. Sounded like he was pretty successful in terms of music, dance, modeling, that kind of stuff. But instead, he gave it up and decided to go into the seminary. And now he's studying to be a priest. So we'll see what God ends up doing in his life. You know, with all of these stories, and again, in my own experience, what I see again and again is that when you come to serve the Lord, he doesn't want to get rid of all of your gifts, all of the talents that he gave you, your personality, your charisma. He doesn't want to take it away. Instead, he wants you to surrender it, but he ultimately wants to use it for the kingdom. And that may look very, very different than you anticipated, but one of the lines I love is that God wastes nothing. Like if you have a gift, it's because he gave it to you and he wants to use it in some way. That to me is the witness of many of these people. They had gifts, and yeah, those gifts were effective in the world for acting or sports or that kind of stuff, but God can also use those gifts in the church for something so much bigger and so much more lasting than anything you could ever accomplish in the world. Whatever you build in the world will eventually pass away, but the treasures you store in heaven last forever. So I hope you guys found this kind of stuff interesting. If there's some other stories that you can think of, let me know in the comments what other videos you might like to see, and we'll see you next time. God bless.